internet, welcome back. This is Sierra, and if you are new around here, hello, my name is Sierra and I'm an American living in Japan. Every week I try to make a new video about my life in Japan, my family's life in Japan, Lush, being vegan, and trying to live a little bit more sustainably. Anyways, in today's video we're going to be talking about something that I am not comfortable talking about, that I don't really want to even talk about in this video, but I know that a lot of you guys have been asking and everyone wants to know how much adoption costs and why adoption costs so much. So I'm going to take a shot of water. I swear it's water. See? Straight from the tap. And we're gonna just talk about it, because even though money is something that we don't like to talk about in our culture, unfortunately money is a very large part of the adoption process. So let's get this water down. And we're gonna talk about it. Okay, so sorry, my straw's making a lot of noise and I put this on the floor. I was gonna hold it, but anyway, because I'm feeling pretty nervous. Okay, so let's not add any fluff. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's just address the question that everyone is wondering: how much international adoption, specifically China adoption, costs? And another question that you're probably wanting to know, and a question that a lot of adoptive parents get asked, and it's really awkward, is people will ask you, so how much did you pay for your child? And if that's the reason that you clicked on this video, I just want to tell you right now that I'm not going to tell you how much we paid for our child, and I'm not going to tell you how much our adoption costs. So if that's why you're here, you're not going to get the answer that you want, so you might as well just click off of this video right now. Go ahead, I'll wait. Okay, so now that all those people are gone, let's talk about that question in general. Sometimes people ask adoptive parents, how much did you pay for that child? And that question is inappropriate on so many levels. So many. And I'm not going to go through all the reasons why that question is appropriate. I'm sure if you go into Google or any of the adoption family groups, people will give you a lot of information about why that is an inappropriate question. But here's just a few of my reasons that I would say that question is inappropriate. Number one, you are asking them not only about how much they paid for something, but about their personal finances. And I know that a lot of people who watch my channel aren't American. So in American culture, I know it's different in other countries. Money is something that, depending on your circle, you do not talk about. How much money we make and how much we pay for things, I would never even ask my best friend how much money her family makes in a year, because it's such an inappropriate question. So don't ask people how much money they make and how much they paid for things. Second, when you go through the adoption process, you are not buying a child. Even that sentence makes me upset. You cannot buy a person. What you are paying for when you spend money through the adoption process is that you are paying for translations, you're paying for the entities that help you, you're paying for fees, you're paying for drivers, you're paying for hotels, you're paying for like medical visits, you're paying for like essentially, like if you give a donation to your child's orphanage, which we're going to get into later, you're giving them money to help them continue what they do. You are not paying them for your child. You're paying for the process. I hope that that makes sense. And the third reason I would say asking someone or a family how much their international adoption cost them is inappropriate is because I think that it says more about the person who's asking than the family who adopted. Like, honestly, if you're not interested in adoption, which usually if someone adopts and someone that did an adoption, they express that before they ask that question, that makes the question slightly more appropriate, or at least if that makes any sense. It says more, like, it makes me wonder, like, about the other person who's asking, like, dude or chick, why do you want to know? Yeah, exactly. So that question is highly inappropriate. And if you know someone who is adopted, if you don't actually want to adopt, like, do your own research and how much it costs, because all the information I'm about to share with you guys came again from the internet. So now that that is taken care of and you guys understand why this is such a weird question, let's get into cost. I did make the same disclaimer in my last video that I posted. I'm going to say it again, that I did use 3 different adoption agencies and our personal expenses as sources to make this video. And the reason that I used the 3 agencies plus ours is that because we adopted internationally as Americans, as expats, our numbers are a little bit different than the numbers that you're going to see here. Also, depending on where you live, these numbers may be different, but I use our agency, that we used for the adoption. I use our agency that we use for the home study, and I use one of the, actually the largest adoption agency in the country that does China adoptions. Once again, I do not work for any of these agencies, and that's why I'm not going to be posting in their links below. If you are interested in international adoption, please reach out to an international adoption agency that does China adoptions in your area, because they will be able to give you the most updated and accurate information on costs. So anyways, without further ado, let's get into the information that I was able to find. Okay, so the overall cost of an international adoption to China is a lot. And the reason that it's a lot is because there are a lot of translation fees and travel fees and hotel fees that you have to pay for. And these things don't pay for themselves. And unfortunately, even people who work for organizations that are nonprofit still have to be paid to run. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, and yes, it's expensive. So the average number I was able to find for the official cost of a China adoption, which again does vary, is somewhere between $25,000 and $40,000. I know that that's a huge range, and the reason the range is so huge is because some agencies are more expensive, sometimes flights change costs, sometimes hotel rates fluctuate, and sometimes translation rates fluctuate. It really just depends, and also inflation. So someone who adopted 10 years ago probably paid less than what someone who is adopting now. With that being said, I have heard of people paying more than $40,000 for an adoption from China, so it really just depends on when you're in country, where you want to spend your money, and I will leave it at that, and we are going to get into that later. So the next part we're going to do is fees that you're going to pay to your agency, and then fees you're going to pay, or things that have to be paid in China. Things that you pay for your agency are a little bit more kind of like set in stone versus what you're going to pay in country, really depending on the orphanage that your child is coming from and depending on where you decide to stay in China. So let's talk about agency fees first. So again, agency fees do cost more or less based on how old the agency is, how good they are, basically the reviews, and where they're located. So for example, if you adopt through an agency in Tennessee, it's probably going to be a little bit cheaper than an agency that's based out of California, just because taxes and rental spaces and stuff. So keep that in mind. So I think I already mentioned this in the China process video. Is first thing you have to do in your China process is you have to file an application. And application, just like with any organization, isn't free because they're going to look at it, they're going to read through it, process it, and then they think that they do actually store your application on file for a while just in case you want to adopt with them later. I know that we use two organizations, so the one that we use for our home study but not our adoption is going to keep our application on file for a certain number of years. So you're kind of just paying for them to look at you, and you're paying for storage space. It does vary, but all three of the websites that I used, the fee was $250, and I've heard that from other people that that's pretty typical of an adoption agency. So you have to pay for that, and there's no way of getting around it. It's like your first initiation step. And if filling out a piece of paper with a little bit of information on and turning it in costing you $250 sounds like a lot, you should probably stop watching now because the numbers get bigger from here. Next thing you're gonna have to pay for in your adoption process is your home study, which we did talk about this. And I put down on here the average that I was able to find is that a home study itself, basically it's like the packet that describes your family, costs about $2,000 to put together. And that's the amount that you actually pay to your organization. Now, if your organization has to come to you, like we did, we had to pay for our caseworker to come to Japan to visit our family, you also have to pay for that. And also within the home study, you have to pay, if you have to go to the doctors, you have to pay for medical fees. If you need a psych evaluation, you have to pay for that. Anything that is asked of you in your home study, you're paying for. They're not paying for that with the money that you give them. So keep that in mind. So all right, that was $2,000 on average. Okay, next thing you're going to pay for is your agency fee. And agency fees, I've heard, are a little bit controversial because ideally agencies can pretty much charge not whatever they want, but what they charge, again, like I said before, varies based on where their office is and the services that they provide for you. Because some agencies are not just agencies, they're also travel agencies, and so they will also arrange all of your travel, so that can end up costing you more. So the numbers I was able to find were between $7,000 and $13,000. Now I know that this is a little bit shady, but I've also heard that some agencies have really high fees, actually include your China donation, which we'll get to later, in your agency fee, which is no longer allowed, but back when we were in our adoption process, I know that there were a lot of agencies that were doing that, so it's possible that's why a lot of the numbers I was able to find were a lot higher than some others. So between $7,000 and $13,000 just for your agency fee. So that's what that costs. And then next thing you have to pay for is your dossier. Your dossier is your big packet of information, which is your official application to adopt from China with your home study and a bunch of other paperwork in it. We are going to do an entire video about the dossier process and what goes into your dossier, and that costs about $3,000. It's $3,000 across the board is what it costs. And the reason it costs so much is because not only does it pay for authenticating all of your documents, meaning I mean, you get all of your documents you send in notarized, but then they go back and check to make sure that those are all real, and that costs time and that costs money. And it also covers registration fees and all the translations, because everything that you submit in English has to be translated multiple times to get an all accurate translation to China. Plus you have to pay for all the people whose desks the dossier goes over. So I don't know exactly how many, but like that dossier will go through multiple sets of hands, and so all those people have to be paid, and it's just reality. So that's what it costs. Okay. And you have to pay for the program fee, and that is between $9,000 and $10,000. And the China program fee basically goes, not, well, you pay it to your agency, but this money actually goes directly to China. At least I think it goes directly to China. Feel free to fact check me on this. I'm sorry if I'm making any mistakes. I'm just doing the best that I can. Basically what that does is that money goes to preparing files for your child, for example. So like when you get your child referral, you'll have a medical report, translations of your medical report. It helps to pay to keep those files like into like the databases, all that kind of stuff. So that's what that pays for. And it also pays for translations of all of those things, and any changes that have to be made, those are also paid for within that. And I know that that seems like a ridiculous amount, but you have to think like every single time a new paper comes through, that has to be translated, and that costs money. So that's just what it costs. Okay, next is your post-adoption services. Now post-adoption services, there's a lot of things in that list, but you have to register with the State Department, which that portion of it is like $500. And then in addition, you also have to pay for 7 post-placement reports that you submit to China. And so that's kind of, you're prepaying the fees for your agency to come see you. If you live away from your agency, you still have to pay for their travel, but it kind of pays for their time to come and work with you. And really, like, if you think about it, like what this costs is kind of a bargain, because they're coming to see you 7 different times. Your post-placement reports are due 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 6 years after. Your first 3 have to be done by a caseworker, but then you do it yourself and you submit through them, and they check it and then they send it through or something like that. So that's what that costs, and that averages about $2,000. I found a lot of different ranges, but that's what the average was when I added them up and divided by 4. So that's what it is. Okay, so that concludes the agency costs and what you're going to pay depending on your agency directly to your agency. And just based on the numbers, I went with the higher numbers because I felt like that was more fair. I'd rather give you guys a bigger number than a smaller number. So on average, you're going to probably be paying something like $23,000 just to your agency to pay for all of the things that I've already mentioned. So yeah, that's a lot of money. I know, it's a lot of money. Okay, sorry about that. I hope the angle's okay. I had a little battery situation, so I've changed it, and now we're back. Okay, so let's say that you have already completed your home study and you have an accepted dossier and you are ready to go to China. Guess what? You still have to spend more money. I know, but let me explain and I'll help you understand why it costs so much. So a couple of these fees I'm going to mention. I know I'm going to miss some fees. I'm bound to miss some fees because with international adoption, there are so many fees that you have to pay. So this is just kind of the few things I was able to think of that you have to pay for that are not directly to your agency. So one of the things you're gonna have to actually do before you do your dossier is you're gonna have to do your USCIS paperwork, which is the United States Customs Immigration Services paperwork. So basically, you're gonna fill out a pre-approval form and then a like secondary asking form. It's the second version of that form, and together those 2 forms cost about $700. And then another thing too that is actually, you don't pay this directly to your agency, but it's part of your home study, is you have to pay for all of those background checks that you request. And you have to pay to get your fingerprints done as well. Now I don't have averages because they weren't listed in the websites, and I actually don't have the information about what we paid for our background checks, but the fingerprints that you have to pay for your background checks, depending on where you live, vary. But I've heard they cost an average of $80 per adult that has to get their fingerprints taken. And if you have to get them redone like I did, you're going to end up paying triple that, what you have to pay for. So that's really frustrating, but it's a necessary evil. You know, you have to pay for that. So it is what it is. And then the next thing you have to pay for is airfare. Now this number was almost impossible to come up with because the agencies listed on all 3 of the sites like ranges of what their customers have kind of paid over the years, and for our personal Airfare was a lot cheaper because we were flying from Japan to China instead of flying from like United States to China and back, so our numbers are completely off. But let's say you get a super cheap flight. Let's say you go now because of the illness that's going around and no one else wants to fly, so you get a super cheap flight from the US. So if it's just you and your spouse, the two of you are going to fly to China, and then you're going to get your child and you're going to fly back. So you're going to pay probably $3,000 in flights for the three of you. Now your child is probably going to have a one-way ticket, so if you're really lucky, maybe it'll be $2,500, but again, that's a fee that you have to pay, and the agency is not going to pay that for you, because why would they pay for your travel to go see your child? They're not going to. Okay, and then next part is one of the biggest chunks of the in-country fees that you're going to have to pay, and that is for your hotel fees. When you are adopting from China, most families have to travel for 2 weeks, because you spend the first week in your child's province, and then you spend the second week in Guangzhou, which is where the American consulate is. And let's just say you want to be cheap, okay? I know that you could stay with family, you could do an Airbnb. Let's say you don't want to do an Airbnb. Let's just say you want to do like a cheap hotel or like a mid-range hotel. Most of the families that we stayed in like Marriott's and things like that. So let's say you're going to do one room for 3 people, and so you're going to pay $200 a night. I know that sounds like a lot, but hotels that are nicer or more like American or Western standard in China are expensive. It's just, that's what they cost. So 200 times 14 nights is $2,800. So there you go, you're spending almost $300 just to sleep. And hopefully that hotel includes breakfast, but I may or may not include breakfast. Yeah, so in addition to that $29K that you're gonna be spending, there's still more that you're gonna have to pay for, because while you're in China, what are you gonna eat? You have to pay for your food, and really I didn't put anything down for a food budget because every family is different. Some people wanna go to the really fancy restaurants, some families are cool eating PB&J in their room. It really just depends on what's great for you. You're also gonna have to pay for your visa. So that's in order for you to go to China to see your child, and you're also gonna pay for your child's visa to take them back with you to the United States. So you have to pay all of those consulate fees. And once again, these things are constantly fluctuating, so I don't have a definitive number about how much that's going to cost. And then also within China, you may or may not have to pay for your child's passport, because when we adopted our child, our son already had a passport because his agency took the children on trips and stuff, so they all had IDs, but your child may not have a passport. So if your child doesn't have a passport, then you have to pay, they get that child their Chinese passport before they can leave China to go to the United States, because even though the child is going to be a citizen, they still need some kind of travel document to get them from point A to point B. And guess who has to pay for that? Yeah. And then last but not least, when you are in China, before you can go to get your consulate appointment, your child has to have a TB test and a medical checkup, which again, you have to go to a facility that's right next to the US consulate, and again, that has to be paid for, in addition to some photographs. I think you have to take pictures of your family for your adoption decree, and you also have to take a picture of your child for their visa. So yeah, that's pretty much everything that I have written down that you will have to pay for in country. Okay, let's check out the list. Yeah, okay, it looks like I covered everything. So in a nutshell, that is kind of a summary of most of the fees that you'll have to pay for your China adoption. Now, again, take everything that I've said with a grain of salt, because there are a lot of ways that you can try to make the China adoption process cheaper, and there are a lot of ways that you actually will be able to make it cheaper, but we're going to make a different video talking about that, especially because I do want to get some input from other families who have adopted, so it's not just mine and Mr's advice. So that's pretty much all I have to say for today. If you guys like this video, thank you guys so much for watching. If you've watched all the way till here, thank you so much. I know that I ramble and that this is a really uncomfortable topic to be able to make a video about, so thank you guys so much for hanging out with me while I do that. If you guys have any questions about any of the things I've said, if you guys have any feedback, go ahead and leave them in the comments for me. I would love to check that out. Also, if you guys have any questions, we do want to do an adoption Q&A about our adoption, about our opinions on adoption, anything like that. You can also leave those down in the comments, because eventually we're going to make that video as well. Other than that, that is all we have to say for today. So if you guys are still watching, thank you guys so much. Make sure to subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.